but each village is a clan, and each clan goes by their village name. So you might hear different names, people, Tongva people introducing themselves differently. You might hear just Tongva. You might hear Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Kij, Mumpatam, Tiat Society. So there's individual clans. We all have different beliefs, cultural practices, and things that we do. But as a whole, as an entire territory, we are Tongva. And close to here in, well, Pasadena, you have San Gabriel Mission. And I hate to say that that's where my family is from, because Indigenous people were captured and enslaved and made to build the missions. But Catholicism and Spanish society became part of Indigenous people's everyday lives. And what I want people to understand is the reason you don't see California Native people in mainstream media or any kind of representation, or you don't see a lot of Indigenous Tongva artists out there, is because Tongva people have suffered multiple waves of genocide. We always hear about the East Coast. We always hear about Christopher Columbus and, you know, the colonization that happened over there. But the West Coast has undergone its very own forms of genocide. First with the Portola expedition and the coming of the Spanish, and the creation of the mission system, which was California's first prison system, essentially, its first concentration camps. This was the first real genocide that took place in California on California Indigenous people. I think the miseducation about that really begins in the 4th grade. And if you went to school here in California, in elementary school, I'm sure you remember your mission project. And if you can remember your mission project, do you remember the name of the mission? Do you remember the Indigenous people who built that said mission? And do you remember what they told you about the Indigenous people? Or was it mostly about the Spanish influence and the Padres, and, you know, a popsicle stick and sugar cube diorama, which is a completely inaccurate representation of the times and what Indigenous people had gone through. And I understand that material might be too much for 4th graders, but I think at this point in your guys' lives now, when with everything going on in the world, it's important to acknowledge Indigenous peoples. It's important to know that representation matters, and it's important to know your roots and where you're come from, and you know, be guided in that asset. But not only the Spanish and the mission system contributed to the genocide of California Native people, but when Mexico separated from Spain, the Mexican Rancho period came over California. And again, Tongva people, California Native nations have to assimilate, have to blend in with everything that's going around them, because the worst thing you can do is be Indigenous, be Tongva, be a California Native person. There is a bounty on your head, you have no land rights, and you're basically nothing but a servant to the Spanish and the Mexican people. So we take Spanish last names, we learn Catholicism, we assimilate into society, and our culture slowly disappears over time. But there are small groups. Families are passing on traditions in secret in their families, sharing stories. The culture is thriving in an underground kind of way. And that's how we've been able to pass on a lot of our stories, creation stories, traditions, and practices. So after the Mexican period comes the influx of the Eastern settlers coming to the West for the gold rush. And now where is the gold? It's in the homelands of the Indigenous people. So they've already been pushed out to the farthest outer banks of their homelands. And that's where the gold is. And they're coming and they're pushing them out. And now there's nowhere to go. So the resort is to eliminate them, exterminate them. And by this point, so much disease, so much killing, murder, and just the diet alone, just the rapid change of land has contributed to the genocide of California Native people. Luckily, we are a resilient and amazing group of people, and things have survived throughout the years. But when we talk about like revitalization, oh, we're bringing our language back, we're practicing our cultures again, we're, you know, going for our traditional ways. It's not this beautiful thing that people think revitalization is. It's a very painful experience to try to find things that you don't know. That's the thing. The history really isn't there. And the history that is written by a colonizer point of view, the Spanish looking down at Native American people as less than subhuman, savage. And that's what we're trying to pick apart to piece our culture together. So it's a very complex system, identity, way of life, and then also growing up in a city and having the city grow up around you as Indigenous people. And there is no land base. We are not a federally recognized tribe, because what that would insist of, if we were to be federally recognized, they would have to honor 18 different treaties that were not ratified and completely disregarded back in California's inception. And there's no land to give Tongva people. Los Angeles is completely developed, and the open space available would be the highest property value in all of the country. It's California. Rent is crazy. Um, I believe my internet is unstable. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Where was I? Lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Someone remind me.
Talking about LA property.
The value of the property values, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's no land base for us. And for Indigenous people, that is the one thing that we need to continue practicing our culture. And so if you take the land away from the people, if you take the culture away from the people, to me and to other Indigenous people, it is continued genocide. You overharvest white sage. Indigenous people are no longer able to gather, to pray, to practice their cultures. So all these little things that are taking place, especially now, it's really important to honor the Tongva people, honor Indigenous people. And one way that I think, you guys can do that easily is by getting California native plants, restoring the landscape. It doesn't seem feasible to like pay reparations, we're in high school, but planting California native plants and honoring the traditional plants and bringing back the butterflies and all the critters and the pollens that naturally existed here. That's one small way you guys can take part in returning the landscape and honoring Indigenous people without appropriating. And I also think visiting some of the places around Udavuna Springs by University High School in, I believe, Santa Monica. They're open on the first of the month. That was the original place the Portola expedition had gone, drank from the springs, learned Los Angeles, and it's a cultural center there now. Also, Tongva Park in Santa Monica. That was a big park developed and created in honor of us, Indigenous people. And it sits on Mumata Ahiko Way, which is a Tongva word for spirit and breath of the ocean. So our culture is still very much in the city. You just have to be open to it, see it, feel it. It's very much there. Downtown Los Angeles is my traditional home village called Yangna, and I have family that had built the Villa Adobe right there in downtown. So if you just walk on Vera Street, you'll see remnants of Tongva culture amidst the Mexican and the Spanish areas. That to me is like the epitome of the birth of Los Angeles. So once you walk down there with new eyes, maybe even go check out the San Gabriel Mission. To me, those are just ways that you can start to be more receptive and conscious about the Indigenous people in California. There are more native tribes in the state of California than there are in the whole of the country, but you don't hear about us. You don't really see us anywhere. And that's kind of where my work intersects as a singer-songwriter and a poet. I try to bring our culture to light and also address the complexities of being an urban Indigenous person, someone who is connected to the land, but the land's covered in concrete and it makes for a really messy, identity journey, which I'm sure you guys are all imparting on right now. But yeah, so if you have questions about the art, about the culture, about the traditions we practice, the food we eat, feel free to ask away. I'm an open book. And I'm very curious to see like what you guys already know or have heard about, or, the mission project, whatever it may be. So I open it to you guys for your questions. Yeah, thank you.
So as we said before, feel free to either type your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask.
While you guys come up with your questions, I do have some stuff I want to show you. This is a basket hat. This is a traditional item worn by California Indigenous women. It is a common element in women's regalia, no matter what California Native tribe, from Kumeyaay in San Diego all the way to Yurok in Northern California. Basket hats are traditional to us. And so I'll put it on. I got no shame. I love it. And what the snake means, it's snake is protection. So it protects my mind from negative thoughts, from anybody trying to send me negative energy or put bad juju on me. The basket hat protects my most sacred space, which is my head. And that is, our connection to creator. So basket hats are incredible. I love these. And when you see a bunch of Native women wearing these, we're about to run it. And then another thing that I love is this clapper stick. This is made from elderberry. We just go right up in the San Gabriel Hills, cut some elderberry and dig out the center. And this is going to be really loud, but you just get that. And that's our musical instrument. We use some rattles, but we're not really drummers like you see a lot of the Plains Native people. We use clapper sticks, rattles, and, things like that. But I'm ready for some questions.
I think there's a question in the chat about traditional foods.
Yeah, so traditional foods. Oh man, the most underused and unappreciated and most nutritious food that exists here in California is the acorn. All of California was just oak trees, oak valleys, groves, just oaks as far as the eye can see. And there's multiple different species of oak trees, but all of the acorns that the tree produces are our main food source. We eat acorn mush, we make acorn bread, we just make acorn flour to make tortillas and things with. Acorns 100%, cactus, nopales, obviously, regular just bay. A lot of bay grows here, so for seasonings and things like that, you can grow that naturally. We would eat lots of rabbit, lots of deer. A lot of the animals that used to exist here in California don't exist here anymore, so it's just, it is what it is, but just natural foods from the land. But acorns 100%, and it's really interesting. If you ever get a chance to try it, try it. You probably won't like it. It needs salt, but it's good. What else?
There's some more questions in the chat.
Should I just go through the chat?
Yeah, go ahead.
Were the tribes able to fight back during the genocide? Yes, a lot of tribes did have their own revolts and revolutions, specifically here in Tongva territory. My hero, one of, Tongva people's greatest heroes, is a medicine woman named Toiparina. And she was about 25, I believe, when she led a revolt against the mission. She had organized this whole coup, and unfortunately, it failed. But the courage it took to take on the entity of the Spanish kingdom and try to save your people is so honorable, and we love her and cherish her. And if you go to Indian Alley in Los Angeles, it's an alley completely committed to Indigenous artists and honoring Indigenous history, and you can see a mural of her there as well. But yeah, tribes all across California really try to fight back. But we're in a pandemic right now, and our people faced great pandemics back then, and unfortunately, we didn't have the immune system to survive. Next question: how would you describe pre-Columban Tongva society and political structures? Ooh, good question. So amazing. I often dream about what it would be like to live in Tolvangar pre-colonization. And imagine if Los Angeles is a paradise to people now, people from all over the world flock to California for the weather, the beautiful landscape, the beaches. Imagine it before all the pollution, the cities, the skyscrapers, the lights. It was a paradise, just blooming with wildlife and flowers, bears, wolves, deers, and multiple villages, all smoke coming up from the huts and ceremony and song. And as far as political systems, we had it down. We all were our own clans. We were part of a larger whole, and we traded and married and moved outside of those territories. Tongva people and California Native people aren't really known for being incredibly violent. I mean, we lived in paradise. There was no need for it. We all shared and we communicated and we married out, and yeah, I can imagine it was beautiful. Next question. Are there any books on Tongva culture that you would recommend? And are there any nearby archaeological sites associated with the Tongva? Yeah, you know what? As far as books, it's kind of interesting because a lot of the books that are out there aren't written by Tongva people. And so I think it's important to read books by Indigenous perspective if you want to get the truth, if you want to know the personal aspect of our history and our lives. As far as that, there is a book titled Bad Indian by Deborah A. Miranda that was really insightful. She talks about her own life and existence and her journey through identity as a California Indigenous woman. As far as like learning about it, any public library, they do have, Tongva resource, but again, written not from an Indigenous perspective. Well, let's see. And as far as archaeological sites, again, I would check out Kutavungna Springs. We are really sensitive about our archaeological sites, so I don't want to disperse that information because those sites need to be protected. Too often in California, our ancestors are dug up, their remains are stolen and put in museums and sold to auctioneers and whatnot. So that's, that's a sensitive thing for Tongva people. Did the Tongva colony exist in Southern California? Yes, so Tongva territory is just the Los Angeles basin, but outside of that, Malibu area is Chumash. We have Tataviam, which is the San Fernando Valley, Serrano, which is going to be, like a Bakersfield, Joshua Tree area, and Kumeyaay to the south. Ahashiman is going to be Orange County. So wherever you go in California, 100% there is a tribal nation that lives and exists there, regardless if signage or the history or the visitor center says otherwise. Just know that. And also there's an app you can use, I believe it's called nativemaps.com. That'll show you whose land you're on. Quick and easy. It has it all worked out, and it's community based. So Indigenous people are telling you where the territories are. Did they have specific medical beliefs like medical rituals? I'm sure they did. Obviously, we didn't have hospitals. I don't know exactly what their medical practices were, but there are people in the tribe that specify in that. The thing with Indigenous people, we all have our own specialty. Like I love to make jewelry, I write and do poetry. Other people love cooking with Indigenous foods. Other people are into the basket weaving, and there are people who are really into like the ancient traditional practices of medicine. I unfortunately am not the person to ask, but thank you for the question. Many tribes were known to not have the concept of personal property. Was this the case for Tongva? Yeah, one of the great things I love about Indigenous cultures as a whole is we regard our wealth and how much we can give away. So you're wealthy if you can give away a lot. And we had things called potlatches, where it was exactly that. You'd gather all your goods as much as you can, and you would just give it away and trade, and that was how your wealth was measured. As far as personal property, everything that was, personal would either be traditional items like our baskets, our fishing tools, nets, our homes, but everything can always be shared, given, made again. There was no sense of like greed. Everything was interconnected. Everything was, community based. Was the Tongva influenced by other tribes? Did they influence other tribes? Yeah, we all intermingled. California actually has the widest array of indigenous languages in the country. So our language, our words are often found in other tribes' languages. Our, Los Angeles indigenous things can be found in other tribes. So we definitely all shared a lot. It's interesting to me how abalone from the West Coast has found its way all the way to, the plains, and, Native people, Cree people, Blackfeet people, Dakota, Lakota people are all using abalone and white sage, which comes from California. So we only had our. And another thing is the rest of the world wouldn't have corn or tomatoes or anything without Indigenous people first. So it's just, the erasure is insane to me because Indigenous people contributed so much to the society that we get to live in today, but you don't really see or hear about us, which is, we're working on that. And then, do you want the Tongva to be given reparations? I will only speak for myself because I don't know. I can't speak for the whole of Tongva. Um, what I would like to see is land. I would like to see a place where my community can gather as an entire whole and begin to practice our ceremonies and begin to have our, our rituals and honor our spring equinoxes and solstices and whatnot. That is what I would love to see for my people. But as far as, paying back all the individuals that were harmed by colonization, I mean, I won't say no to a paycheck, but ideally, I don't foresee it in the future. And again, I think individuals can contribute and pay back whatever they feel in their heart is owed, which, and again, it's individuals. But it would be just to know whose land you're on and speak kindly of people and plant native plants and, start to walk in a more respectful, conscious way for the earth and the water and be grateful for, all the life that is around us. It's so easy to get lost in a city and to ignore the beauty that does exist here and the spirit of Tongva people and Tolvangar, because it does exist. And so, those are the things that I hold on to make it through the crazy traffic and the constant noise of living in a city. Do any myths, legend come from the Tongva tribe? I wouldn't say, well, I guess a myth and a legend would be Island of the Blue Dolphins, that book in the 4th grade that they make you read. Is a complete inaccurate representation of Juana Maria, another great Tongva hero who was left alone on San Nicolas Island for 18 years. And yeah, they spun her story so weird. So, I mean, that's another Zoom, but yeah, that would be a myth and a legend of a story that has made it around the world. What kind of games and sports did the Tongva play? Stick game, which is like a guess which hand the stick is in, but it's done fast and quick, and it's really crazy. And then other things like that. Lacrosse was a big thing for Indigenous people. And other than that, I don't really know other games besides the stick game. But I'm assuming we had plenty. Something with acorns, I'm sure. They could be dice. But yeah, thank you so much for your questions, you guys. I appreciate all the thought that went into it. One thing I want to leave you guys with is look into your family history. If your grandparents, your parents, any family members are still around, ask them while you have the chance to, and get to know where you're from and hear their stories. I am 29 now, and I wish I would have done that. And because as you get older, you become more self-aware and you realize all these things about yourself that kind of click and make sense if you know where you come from and your family line and whatnot. So I think it's really important, and it can only increase your connection to the landscape, because I believe no matter your race, ethnicity, how you identify, somewhere down the line in your family, they had their hands in the soil. They were working for their food, for their lives. They were honoring and giving thanks for the landscape around them. And I think that's what we need right now, especially if you live in a city. So, get dirty, get your hands in there, plant some native plants, and, think about the ones who came before you and honor their existence and walk in a good way. And then I'll ask, or this last question, who are some of my role models? Pretty much everybody in my tribe, everyone, all my elders, the fact that they've made it to their age and are still continuing to educate and show up, however long it takes them, and their walkers and wheelchairs, they show up for Indigenous people and for their tribe and to educate and share the culture, even, in their old age. And so that inspires me. But I look at everybody as a role model. We have something to learn from every single person. We are all equal, and we all share beautiful stories that somehow cross and interconnect. So if you are an artist, an aspiring poet, writer, singer, actor, anything, scientist, whatever you imagine, if you do it with good in your heart and good intentions and you honor, the beautiful lives that we have, I think you'll succeed, and just stay true to you. So I thank you all so much for your time. I don't want to take up too much more.